This is a perfect opportunity to get pregnant for the Alpha King.
The royal decree arrived at dawn, sealed in blood and bound by pack law. 3 male heirs had been born to an Omega who should never have touched the Alpha's bed. The forbidden bloodline now threatened everything. Before we dive deeper into this tale of betrayal and power, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. You're going to need it for what's coming. The wine that changed destiny. For 12 years, the kingdom had whispered about Alpha Marcus Aurelius's curse. 12 years without an heir. 12 years of Luna Octavia's empty womb. 12 years of visiting every healer, every witch, every oracle who claimed they could break whatever darkness hung over the royal bloodline. The pack elders had grown restless. Pack law was clear. An alpha without heirs by his 13th year of rule faced challenge. And challenges meant blood. Marcus had built his kingdom on strength, on the iron will that had united 7 fractured territories under one banner. But strength meant nothing without legacy. Octavia had been the perfect Luna, daughter of the Northern High Council, trained in diplomacy since childhood, beloved by the common wolves. She had stood beside Marcus through 2 wars, had negotiated the peace treaties that brought prosperity. The kingdom adored her. But the kingdom needed heirs more than it needed love. In the royal kitchens, far below the marble halls where decisions of state were made, a young Omega named Livia Marcella stirred pots and scrubbed floors. She had served the palace for 7 years, arriving as a frightened 15-year-old orphan from the eastern slums. The head cook had taken pity on her, taught her which herbs went into the Alpha's morning tea, how to prepare the Luna's favorite honey cakes. Livia knew her place. Omegas always did. She had watched from the shadows as Luna Octavia's face grew more drawn with each passing moon. Had seen the way Marcus's jaw tightened whenever the council gathered. Had heard the kitchen gossips whisper about bloodlines and succession, and what might happen if the curse remained unbroken. Livia had also learned things in those 7 years. The old cook, before she died, had taught her more than recipes. Had shown her the ancient texts hidden in the pantry's false wall, grimoires written in languages that predated the pack system itself. Knowledge that Omegas weren't supposed to possess. Knowledge about fertility. About magic that could override even the strongest curse. It took Livia 3 months to prepare the wine. Moonblood vine from the forbidden forest. Harvested at midnight during the dark moon. Essence of wolf's bane. Diluted precisely to avoid poison. 7 drops of her own blood. Offered with intent. And something else, something darker. A binding spell that would ensure conception, that would override any magical barrier preventing new life. The wine glowed faintly in the darkness of her quarters, crimson and gold swirling together like liquid fire. Livia knew what she was doing was forbidden. Pack law prohibited Omegas from using magic, especially magic that involved the royal bloodline. The punishment for such transgression was death. Not a quick death either. They would make an example of her, let her burn in the public square while the pack watched. But Livia had spent 7 years being invisible. 7 years watching the desperation in Marcus's eyes. 7 years of being nothing, having nothing, meaning nothing. This wine could change everything. She waited for the night of the autumn festival, when the palace halls ran thick with wine and celebration. When Marcus would make his traditional tour of the kitchens, thanking the staff for their service. It was the one night of the year when an Omega could approach the Alpha directly without going through channels. Livia wore her best dress, the only one without patches. She braided her dark hair with silver thread. Her hands shook as she poured the wine into a crystal goblet, one of the fine ones reserved for visiting dignitaries. When Marcus entered the kitchens, surrounded by his guard but away from the Luna for this private moment of appreciation, Livia stepped forward. "Alpha," she said, keeping her eyes lowered as was proper. "I have prepared something special for you. A vintage from the eastern vineyards, aged 12 years. For your 12 years of glorious rule." The symbolism wasn't lost on Marcus. 12 years of rule. 12 years without heirs. His gold eyes studied her for a long moment. Livia could feel the weight of his alpha power pressing against her omega nature, making her want to bare her throat in submission. But she held steady, holding out the goblet like an offering. "What is your name?" Marcus asked. "Livia Marcella, Alpha. I serve in the kitchens." 7 years you've served. He knew. Course he knew. A good Alpha knew every member of his household, even the lowest omega. Marcus took the goblet. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and Livia felt the spark of magic transfer from the wine into his bloodstream. His eyes widened slightly. He felt it too, that surge of power, of possibility. "This wine," Marcus said slowly. "What's in it?" Livia's heart hammered. If she lied and he discovered it, death. If she told the truth, also death. But something in his expression, some desperate hunger that matched her own ambition, made her choose honesty. "Hope, Alpha. I put hope in it." Marcus stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he drank. Drained the entire goblet in 3 long swallows. The magic activated immediately. Livia could see it in the way his pupils dilated, the way his breathing changed. The fertility curse shattered like glass. "Come with me," Marcus commanded. His voice rough with something that wasn't entirely human anymore. The wine was working faster than Livia had anticipated, overwhelming the Alpha's legendary control. She followed him through corridors she had only seen from a distance, past guards who looked away as was their training when the Alpha moved with purpose. They reached his private chambers, not the ones he shared with Luna Octavia, but his personal sanctuary. The door closed behind them. What happened that night was not gentle. It was not romantic. It was primal and desperate and driven by magic that neither of them could fully control. Marcus took her with the urgency of a male who had been denied his most basic biological imperative for over a decade. Livia surrendered with the knowledge that this single act could either elevate her beyond her wildest dreams or destroy her completely. She had prepared for both outcomes. When dawn came, Marcus woke alone in his chambers, the memory of the night fragmented and hazy. He remembered the wine. Remembered golden eyes watching him with something that wasn't fear. Remembered the overwhelming need that had consumed him. And he remembered the omega from the kitchens. Livia had already returned to her quarters, her body aching but her heart soaring. She could feel the change already, the subtle shift in her omega biology that signaled successful conception. The spell had worked. She carried the Alpha's child. Now came the dangerous part, surviving long enough to reveal it. The secret grows. Livia told no one about that night. She worked her kitchen shifts as always, peeling potatoes and preparing bread, acting as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She could feel the life growing inside her, could sense the powerful bloodline taking root. Alpha Marcus avoided the kitchens for 3 weeks. When he finally appeared during his monthly inspection, his eyes found Livia immediately. She curtsied properly, kept her expression neutral. But when their gazes met, understanding passed between them. What had happened was real, and they both knew it. 2 months passed. Livia's omega physiology kept the pregnancy hidden longer than it would have for a beta or alpha female. But she knew it wouldn't last. Soon the scent would change, would broadcast her condition to every wolf in the palace. She needed to tell Marcus before someone else discovered it. Livia waited until late evening, when the Luna was attending a council session in the northern tower. She sent a message through one of the younger guards, one who owed her favors from years of sneaking him extra desserts. The message was simple. The hope has taken root. Marcus understood immediately. He summoned her to his study, a rarely used room filled with maps and military strategies. When Livia entered, he was standing with his back to her, staring out at the kingdom he had built. "You're certain?" he asked without turning. "Yes, Alpha. The signs are clear." "How long?" 2 months, Alpha. Marcus turned then, and Livia saw the conflict written across his handsome face. Hope and fear warring in equal measure. This is what he had wanted for 12 years. But the circumstances were impossible. "The Luna," he started. "Must be told." Livia finished. I know Pack Law, Alpha. I'm not asking to replace her. I'm only asking to be allowed to carry your child safely. It was the right thing to say. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. He had feared she would demand recognition, status, a challenge to Octavia's position. But Livia was smarter than that. She knew that the one thing more important than tradition was legacy. If the child is male, Marcus said carefully, he will be my heir. Pack Law makes no distinction between Omega-born or Luna-born sons when there are no other options. I understand, Alpha. You will be protected, moved to better quarters, given whatever you need. I only need to survive the Luna's reaction, Alpha. Marcus's expression darkened. Octavia is a good woman. She has wanted this almost as desperately as I have. Livia said nothing. She had seen the Luna's face when visiting healers left shaking their heads. Had watched Octavia's careful mask slip during the quiet moments when she thought no one was observing. The Luna wanted an heir, yes. But she wanted it to come from her own body, to be proof of her worthiness. This child would be both salvation and insult. The next evening, Marcus called a private meeting with Luna Octavia. No guards, no witnesses. Just the Alpha and his Luna in their shared chambers, discussing the impossible. Livia waited in her quarters, hands pressed against her still flat belly, and prayed to God she wasn't sure existed. The summons came 3 hours later. When Livia entered the royal chambers, she expected rage. Expected the Luna to strip her position, perhaps even order her death despite Pack Law's protection of pregnant Omegas. Instead, she found Octavia standing by the window, tears streaming down her beautiful face. Is it true? The Luna asked, her voice breaking. Yes, Luna. I carry the Alpha's child. Octavia turned to face her, and Livia saw something unexpected in her expression. Relief. Profound, overwhelming relief. 12 years, Octavia whispered. 12 years I have failed in my primary duty. Every month, every year, watching the council grow more restless, knowing that my barrenness threatened everything Marcus built. She crossed the room, stopping just in front of Livia. You have no idea what you've done. Livia tensed, ready for violence. Instead, Octavia took her hands. You've saved us, the Luna said. You've given this kingdom what I could not. Ne'er. A future. The gratitude in her voice was genuine. Livia had prepared for anger, for jealousy, for political maneuvering. She hadn't prepared for this, for a Luna so worn down by her own perceived failure that she welcomed another woman's pregnancy as deliverance. I don't want your position, Livia said quickly. I only want safety for your child. I know. Octavia squeezed her hands. And you shall have it. More than that. You will be welcomed into this palace as an honored member of the pack. You will want for nothing. Marcus stepped forward then, placing a hand on Octavia's shoulder. The love between them was real, Livia could see it. This wasn't a political marriage strained by circumstance. This was genuine partnership, temporarily broken by biology but not destroyed. Pack Law requires the child be legitimate, Marcus said. Raised with all the privileges of royal blood. But tradition also allows for discretion. You need not be elevated to Luna status. You can remain simply as the child's mother, living in comfort but without political power. It was more generous than Livia had dared hope for. She would be protected, provided for, but not thrust into a role she wasn't prepared for. The Luna would retain her position, her dignity. And the kingdom would finally have its heir. I accept these terms with gratitude, Alpha. Luna. Octavia smiled then, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Then we shall announce it tomorrow. Let the kingdom rejoice. An heir is coming. That night, Livia lay in her new quarters, 3 rooms instead of 1, with actual windows and soft bedding, and wondered if she had just made the greatest triumph of her life or the greatest mistake. She wouldn't have to wait long to find out. The announcement. The kingdom exploded with celebration when the announcement was made. 12 years of anxiety released in a single moment. The Alpha would have an heir. The bloodline would continue. The pack's future was secure. Luna Octavia stood beside Alpha Marcus on the royal balcony, waving to the cheering crowds. Her smile never wavered, her composure perfect. Only those who knew her well could see the tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the balcony rail just a fraction too hard. Livia was not present for the announcement. She remained in her new quarters, as was proper for an Omega bearing the Alpha's child. But she could hear the roar of approval from the citizens, could feel the shift in the palace's energy. The kitchen staff came to visit her in waves, some offering genuine congratulations, others barely concealing their shock and envy. How had little Livia, the orphan girl who scrubbed pots, ended up carrying the most important child in the kingdom? Livia smiled and accepted their well wishes and told no one about the wine, about the magic, about the calculated risk that had paid off beyond her wildest imaginings. The first month passed smoothly. Livia attended healer appointments supervised by the palace's best physicians. Her diet was carefully monitored. She was given books to read, instructors to teach her proper etiquette now that she would be mother to a prince. Luna Octavia visited once a week, bringing gifts and asking about Livia's comfort with what seemed like genuine concern. It was almost perfect. But at her third-month check, the healer went very still while examining Livia's belly. His weathered hands pressed carefully against her abdomen, feeling for the life force within. His expression shifted from concentration to surprise to something close to shock. "What is it?" Livia asked, anxiety spiking. "Alpha Marcus must be summoned immediately," the healer said. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "Not wrong, child. Extraordinary." Marcus arrived within minutes, Luna Octavia at his side. They had been in a council meeting, discussing trade agreements with the Western territories. Both wore their formal robes of state, symbols of authority embroidered in silver thread. "What have you found?" Marcus demanded. The healer pressed his hands against Livia's belly again, closed his eyes, reached out with a diagnostic magic that came with 50 years of practice. When he opened his eyes, they were shining. "3, he said simply. "She carries 3. The room went silent. "Triplets," Tavia whispered. 3 strong heartbeats, 3 distinct life forces, all developing perfectly. The healer looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. "In all my years, I have never felt such powerful bloodlines in unborn children. These are not ordinary heirs, Alpha. These are something special." Marcus's hand found Octavia's, squeezing tight. Livia could see the emotions washing across his face. Shock, joy, fear, pride, all tangled together. Not just one heir. 3. The kingdom wouldn't just have succession secured, it would have abundance. 3 sons, Marcus asked. "Too early to determine gender, Alpha. But given the strength of the bloodlines, I would not be surprised." Livia pressed her hands against her belly, feeling for the 3 lives the healer had sensed. She had expected 1 child, had planned for the complications that would bring. But 3. This changed everything. This was a divine blessing or a curse in disguise. She couldn't yet tell which. Octavia released Marcus's hand and moved to sit beside Livia on the examination bed. 3 chances to secure the bloodline, she said softly. 3 heirs where we had none. The gods have smiled on us. Or tested us, Marcus murmured. The announcement of triplets sent the kingdom into even greater celebration. 3 heirs. The Alpha's bloodline wasn't just restored, it was exploding into abundance. Festivals were declared. Offerings were made at every temple. Bets were placed on whether the children would be sons or daughters, what they would look like, which would be born first. Livia became the most watched Omega in pack history. Her quarters were expanded again. Guards were posted outside her doors. Every meal was prepared by specialized cooks and tested for poison. She wasn't allowed to walk anywhere without escort, wasn't permitted any activity that might risk the precious lives growing inside her. She was treated like treasure. Valuable, protected treasure. But still treasure, not a person. As her belly swelled through the 4th and 5th months, Livia felt the dynamic shifting. Luna Octavia's visits became less frequent. When they did occur, the warmth that had characterized their early interactions cooled into politeness. Octavia still brought gifts, still asked after Livia's health. But something had changed. It was the kitchen gossip that finally told Livia what was happening in the council chambers. "The elders are pushing," one of the beta servants whispered during a visit, saying that 3 Omega-born sons have more right to succession than a Baron Luna, saying maybe it's time for new leadership. Livia's blood ran cold. That's treason. That's politics. And you're at the center of it whether you want to be or not. The servant was right. Livia had thought she could remain neutral, could simply be the vessel for the Alpha's heirs without getting drawn into palace intrigue. But she was discovering that pregnancy wasn't just biological, it was political. Every decision, every gesture, every word she spoke was analyzed for meaning. Was she positioning herself to challenge the Luna? Did she have ambitions beyond motherhood? Were the triplets a threat to the established order or its salvation? Livia tried to stay quiet, to avoid giving anyone ammunition. But silence itself became suspicious. Why wasn't she more grateful? Why didn't she praise the Luna more publicly? Was she secretly planning something? The truth was, Livia was too exhausted to plan anything. Carrying 3 powerful bloodlines was draining her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The healers assured her this was normal for multiples, especially when the father was an alpha as strong as Marcus. But normal didn't make it easier. She spent most of her 6th month in bed, barely able to keep food down. Her body overwhelmed by the demands of the 3 lives growing impossibly large inside her small frame. Luna Octavia came to visit during one of Livia's worst days. Found her pale and sweating, barely able to sit up without assistance. For a moment, the old warmth returned to Octavia's eyes. "You're suffering," the Luna said softly. "It's worth it," Livia managed. "For the heirs." "Is it?" Octavia sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Or have we all convinced ourselves that some purposes are worth any sacrifice?" It was the most honest thing the Luna had said to her in months. Livia looked at her properly, saw the exhaustion that matched her own. Octavia had spent 12 years being judged, measured, found wanting. Now Livia was experiencing just a taste of that pressure, and it was crushing her after only 6 months. "I don't want your position," Livia said again, meaning it with her whole heart. "I know you don't," Octavia replied. "But that might not matter. The children will decide our fates now, not our intentions." She was right, and both women knew it. The birth that changed everything. The 7th month brought complications. Livia's body simply wasn't large enough to safely carry 3 full-term alpha bloodline children. The healers put her on strict bed rest, used magic to keep the babies from arriving too early. Every day was a negotiation between Livia's failing strength and the children's need to develop. Marcus visited more frequently now, seeing firsthand the toll this was taking. He sat beside her bed while she slept, held her hand through the worst of the pain, and Livia saw guilt written across his face. He had wanted heirs so desperately, had drunk the wine she offered without questioning too deeply. Now he watched her pay the price. "I'm sorry," he said one evening when she woke to find him there. "Don't be," Livia whispered. "I chose this. You shouldn't have had to choose survival through sacrifice." It was the most honest acknowledgement of power imbalance she had ever heard from an alpha. Livia squeezed his hand weakly. "Make sure they're worth it. The children. Make sure they justify this. I swear it on my blood and title." The babies came early anyway, 3 weeks before the healers wanted. Livia woke at midnight with her water breaking and contractions already strong. The palace erupted into controlled chaos. Healers rushing to her chambers, Marcus summoned from a late council meeting, Octavia appearing from her own room still in her nightgown. The birth took 14 hours. 14 hours of agony, of Livia's body being torn apart to deliver children whose bloodlines were too powerful for her small Omega frame. The healers used every spell they knew to keep her alive, to prevent her from bleeding out as the first child crowned. Boy. Dark hair, gold eyes, screaming with alpha lungs. They barely had time to cut the cord before the second child came. Another boy. Lighter hair, Marcus's strong features, already trying to shift before he'd drawn 5 breaths. The third took longest. Livia was fading by then, her body having given everything it had. The healers shouted instructions, poured magic into her failing system. Marcus held one hand, Octavia the other, both of them willing strength into her. The third child finally came just before dawn. Another boy. 3 sons. 3 heirs. The kingdom's future secured 3 times over. Livia barely registered the information before she passed out, her body shutting down from trauma and exhaustion. The healers worked frantically, knowing that losing the mother after she'd delivered 3 heirs would be seen as a catastrophic failure. She survived. Barely. When Livia woke 3 days later, she found her room filled with flowers and gifts. The triplets were in enchanted bassinets beside her bed, sleeping peacefully under magical protection spells. They were perfect, tiny and wrinkled but unmistakably powerful, even at only days old. Luna Octavia was sitting in the corner, watching the babies with an expression Livia couldn't quite read. "They're beautiful," the Luna said quietly. 3 perfect sons. "They're the kingdom's," Livia replied, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Not mine. Don't lie to yourself about that." Octavia stood and moved closer, looking down at the sleeping infants. "You gave birth to them. You nearly died for them. They will always be yours, no matter what pack law says about inheritance and succession." There was something in her voice, some edge that made Livia uneasy. But she was too exhausted to analyze it, too drained to do anything but sleep and occasionally nurse the insatiable babies who seemed to drain her as completely after birth as they had before. The kingdom celebrated for a week straight. 3 alpha sons born to Marcus Aurelius. The pack was secure for generations. The bloodline was strong. Succession was assured. Marcus named them formally in a ceremony Livia was too weak to attend. Maximus, Titus, and Lucius. Names of power and tradition. Names that would become legend. During that first month, while Livia recovered and learned to care for 3 demanding infants, she felt the strange isolation of importance. Everyone wanted to see the babies. No one really wanted to see her. She was the vessel that had delivered them, important only for what she had produced. But the babies needed her. Their powerful bloodlines required strong omega milk to properly develop, and Livia's bond with them was instantaneous and overwhelming. She loved them with a fierce, protective intensity that surprised her. These weren't just stepping stones to better position. These were her sons. Her sons who also happened to be heirs to the most powerful pack in 5 territories. Luna Octavia continued to visit, always proper, always courteous. She brought gifts for the children, praised their development, told Livia that she was doing wonderfully. But that edge remained in her voice, that unnamed tension that grew stronger each week. Livia told herself she was imagining it. That exhaustion and hormone changes were making her paranoid. That Octavia was still the gracious Luna who had welcomed her pregnancy with relief and gratitude. She was wrong. The shift, the change in Livia began so gradually that no one noticed at first. Not even Livia herself. It started with small things. A kitchen servant who forgot to bow when Livia passed in the hallway. She found herself stopping, turning back, feeling a hot flash of anger at the disrespect. When had she started expecting such deference? A healer who suggested she might wean one of the triplets to a wet nurse to ease her burden. Livia had snapped that no common beta would feed her sons, that only she could provide what they needed. The healer had backed away, apologizing, and Livia had felt a surge of satisfaction at asserting her authority. When had she developed authority? By the 6th week, Livia was strong enough to attend council meetings where the children were discussed. She sat in a corner, as was proper for an Omega, holding whichever infant was fussiest. But she listened to every word, absorbed every political nuance. She heard the elders debating which son should be designated primary heir, heard them discussing bloodline purity and succession law, and she heard them carefully not mentioning Luna Octavia, the barren wife who had been superseded by the fertile Omega. Something cold settled in Livia's chest, something that whispered, "These are your sons. Your bloodline now runs in the royal family. Why should you defer to a woman whose only claim is a marriage certificate?" She pushed the thought away, horrified at herself. This wasn't who she was. She was Livia the kitchen Omega, grateful for her unexpected elevation, content with her assigned role. But the thought returned, and brought friends. You nearly died giving the Alpha what he needed most. What has Octavia sacrificed? Her position is ceremonial now. Me. The triplets need their mother to be strong, to protect their interests. You have power now. Real power. Why pretend you don't? The voice in her head sounded like ambition, but it felt like maternal instinct. Protecting her children, ensuring their status. That was just good parenting, wasn't it? The triplets were 2 months old when Livia requested a private meeting with Alpha Marcus. Not as a submissive Omega seeking permission, but as the mother of his heirs demanding audience. The shift in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus noticed. His eyebrows rose when she entered his study without the usual deference, when she sat without being invited, when she met his eyes directly instead of lowering her gaze. "You've changed," he observed. "I've grown," Livia corrected. "Motherhood does that. Does it also make one forget their place in pack hierarchy?" The rebuke was mild but pointed. Livia felt anger flash through her. How dare he speak to her that way? She was the mother of his heirs, not some cowering Omega who... She stopped, took a breath, recognized with dawning horror that she had nearly challenged an Alpha. Or Alpha, the father of her children and the male who could destroy her with a word. "Forgive me," she said, forcing submission back into her voice. "The sleepless nights have made me forget myself." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "The healers warned me this might happen. That birthing multiple Alpha bloodlines can permanently alter an Omega's brain chemistry. That the hormone changes can affect personality, increase aggression, amplify protective instincts beyond reasonable bounds." "I'm fine," Livia insisted. "Are you?" "Because the reports I'm receiving suggest otherwise. You've dismissed 3 servants for minor infractions. You've demanded higher quality clothing and furnishings. You've begun correcting pack members of higher rank." He leaned forward. "These are not the behaviors of the grateful Omega who accepted my terms 7 months ago." Livia wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself. But some part of her, the part that was still the kitchen girl who had survived by knowing when to be small, recognized the danger in his tone. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to remember who you are. And more importantly, who you are not." Marcus's voice was gentle but implacable. "You are the mother of my sons. That is precious and important and grants you protection and status. But you are not Luna. You are not my equal. And you will never be either of those things." The words hit like a physical blow. Not because they were unexpected. Livia had always known the limits of her position. But because some new part of her, the part that had grown with her swelling belly and strengthened with each moment of her sons' lives, rejected those limits completely. Why shouldn't she be Luna? She had done what Octavia couldn't. She carried Marcus's bloodline now. His sons called her Mama and would grow to rule kingdoms. What had Octavia done except fail? "I understand, Alpha," Livia said, lowering her eyes in the submissive gesture she had once meant sincerely. But she didn't understand. Or rather, she understood perfectly and rejected it entirely. That night, alone with her sleeping sons, Livia felt something crystallize inside her. A decision, a path, a destiny that she hadn't planned but now seemed inevitable. These were her children, her bloodline, her legacy, and she would do whatever necessary to protect it. even if it meant destroying the Luna who stood in her way. The poison spreads. The 3rd month after the birth was when Livia began truly working. She started with the servants. Small gifts, kind words, remembering names and families. The lower-ranked pack members who were invisible to the nobility but who saw everything, heard everything. Livia had been one of them once, knew how to speak their language, understood what they valued. Loyalty, she learned, could be bought with simple recognition. "The Luna barely acknowledges you exist," she would mention casually to a beta servant. "Such a shame when you work so hard. I remember when you helped me in the kitchens," she told a former colleague. "I've never forgotten the kindness you showed a lonely Omega girl. If you ever need anything. These beautiful boys need so much," she sighed to anyone who would listen. "And their mother must work so hard while some others simply attend parties. Never anything direct. Never anything that could be called treasonous. Just gentle implications, careful comparisons. Slow poison dripped into the palace social structure. The servants began comparing Luna Octavia and Omega Livia in whispers. How the Luna produced nothing despite her high rank. How Livia gave the kingdom 3 heirs despite her low birth. How Octavia lived in luxury while Livia sacrificed her body. How the Luna attended councils while Livia raised the future itself. The comparisons spread. From servants to guards. From guards to minor nobility. From minor nobility to council members' spouses. Like a disease, the doubt about Octavia's worthiness infected the palace. Luna Octavia felt it happening and didn't know how to fight it. She couldn't punish Livia. The Omega was the mother of the Alpha's heirs, untouchable by pack law. She couldn't address the rumors directly. Doing so would make her seem paranoid and petty. She couldn't complain to Marcus. He was already balancing too many political pressures. So Octavia did what nobility often does when threatened. She retreated into protocol and tradition, insisting on the respect her position demanded even as that position eroded beneath her. Which only made her seem more desperate. Livia watched it all with satisfaction that would have horrified her former self. But her former self had been weak, powerless, grateful for scraps. This new Livia understood power. Understood that the pack respected strength above all else. And she had given them strength. 3 sons, 3 heirs, 3 futures. The triplets themselves were developing remarkably. At 3 months, they were the size of 6-month-old pups. Their alpha bloodlines accelerating their growth. Maximus was the largest, the natural leader even in infancy. Titus was the clever one, already tracking movements with suspicious intelligence. Lucius was the charmer, smiling at anyone who cooed at him. They were perfect, and they were hers. Livia began attending more council meetings, babies in tow. "I want them to learn governance from birth," she explained when questioned. Marcus allowed it. The sight of the heirs did seem to settle the council, reminded everyone what was at stake. But Livia wasn't there to educate her sons. She was there to observe, to learn, to understand the mechanisms of power she had never been taught. She learned which council members were Marcus's strongest supporters, which ones had doubts about Luna Octavia, which ones valued bloodline above all else, which ones could be swayed with the right pressure. And she began applying that pressure. So carefully, so subtly. "Council member Gaius, your advice on the eastern trade routes was brilliant," she mentioned one day. The Luna's suggestion seemed less informed. "Ambassador Cassius, the boys were so taken with your stories of the northern territories. It's wonderful when they can learn from wisdom rather than merely position. Senator Paulus, I wonder if you might speak with Alpha Marcus about the children's education. I worry the Luna's ideas about tutors are too traditional. Never direct criticism. Never outright accusation. Just gentle redirection. Careful positioning of herself as forward-thinking and competent while implying Octavia was outdated and ceremonial. The 4th month brought the first formal challenge. Council member Quintus, a traditionalist who had long questioned Octavia's worthiness due to her barrenness, proposed a revision to pack law. Not to remove Luna's status, that would be too extreme. But to create a new title, Mother of Heirs, with full council voting rights and status equal to the Luna. The Omega who births the next generation deserves recognition beyond simple motherhood, Quintus argued. She has done what no other could. She should have voice in how her sons are raised, how the kingdom is governed. Octavia stood in the council chamber, her face pale but composed. This is unprecedented. Pack law has maintained the separation between Luna and others for centuries. To change it now. Times change, another council member interrupted. The law was written when Lunas could be expected to provide heirs. When that fails, should we not adapt? The debate raged for hours. Marcus tried to remain neutral, tried to balance tradition with pragmatism. But Livia could see him wavering, could see him looking at his 3 sons and then at his barren wife and making calculations. In the end, the vote was postponed, but not defeated. Octavia left the chamber with her spine straight and her head high. But Livia saw the tears she couldn't quite hide, felt a moment of guilt that she brutally suppressed. This wasn't about hurting Octavia. This was about protecting her son's future. That's what she told herself. That night, Marcus summoned both women to his private study. "This ends now," he said flatly. "Both of you. The political maneuvering, the social manipulation, the undermining. It stops." "I don't know what you mean," Livia said innocently. "Don't insult my intelligence." Marcus's alpha command filled the room, making both women's wolves whimper in submission. "Livia, you have been systematically building support for yourself at Octavia's expense. Octavia, you have been excluding Livia from palace functions and spreading your own subtle doubts about her worthiness as the children's mother." Octavia's face flushed. Livia kept her expression neutral. "You are both important to this pack," Marcus continued. "The Luna who has served loyally for 12 years. The mother who birthed my heirs. Neither of you should be trying to destroy the other." "She wants my position," Octavia said, voice tight. "I want respect," Livia corrected. "For myself and my children." "You have respect," Marcus snapped. "What you want is power. And Octavia, you're clinging to relevance through fear rather than adapting to new realities." He looked at both of them. "Find a way to coexist peacefully, or I will enforce peace in ways neither of you will enjoy." It was a command. An alpha command. Both women bowed their heads in submission and murmured agreement. But Livia left that meeting knowing nothing had really changed. Marcus could command peace, but he couldn't command her ambition away. Couldn't command the protective fury that rose in her every time someone implied her sons were lesser than Luna-born children would have been. And Octavia left knowing that her position, once unassailable, was now actively threatened. That the Omega she had welcomed with open arms had become a viper in her nest. The war between them had been declared. The Alpha could delay it, could demand civility. But he couldn't stop it. The blood oath. The triplets were 5 months old when Livia made her most dangerous move. She called for a blood oath ceremony. Pack law allowed mothers of heirs to request a formal bonding between their children and the pack's power structure. It was ancient ritual, rarely used in modern times, but absolutely binding when invoked. A blood oath would tie the triplets directly to the pack's magic, would recognize them formally as heirs with all the protection and status that implied. It would also, critically, require Luna Octavia to swear loyalty to the children publicly, to acknowledge their place above her own, to ceremonially surrender any claim that her position superseded theirs. "This is unnecessary," Octavia protested to Marcus. "The boys are already recognized as heirs. They don't need a blood oath. Pack law says any heir's mother can request the ceremony," Livia countered sweetly. "I'm only asking for what tradition allows." Marcus studied both women carefully. The blood oath was technically Livia's right to call for, and refusing it would look suspicious, would make people wonder why the Luna was reluctant to formally acknowledge the heirs. "The ceremony will be held," Marcus decided, "in accordance with tradition." Octavia's face went white. The blood oath ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon. The entire pack would attend. This was one of the most significant rituals in their culture. Every alpha family for 5 territories sent representatives. The Northern High Council, Octavia's own family, traveled south to witness. The palace prepared for weeks. Ritual circles were drawn in the Great Hall. Ancient texts were consulted for proper wording. The triplets were fitted with formal robes bearing the pack's crest. Livia spent those weeks in a fever of preparation and anticipation. This was it, the moment when her sons would be irrevocably recognized, when their status would be unquestionable, when she, by extension, would be untouchable. She barely slept, barely ate, poured all her energy into ensuring every detail of the ceremony was perfect. The night before the ritual, Octavia came to Livia's chambers. "Don't do this," the Luna said quietly. "Please." "Do what?" "Honor my children according to pack law. You know what you're doing. This ceremony will humiliate me in front of the entire pack. My own family will watch me swear submission to your sons. They're Marcus's sons too. But they're not mine." Octavia's voice broke. "That's the point, isn't it? You want everyone to see that I failed, that you succeeded, that I'm obsolete." For just a moment Livia felt it again, that flicker of guilt, of recognition that she was hurting someone who had shown her kindness. But she crushed it ruthlessly. "You welcomed my pregnancy," Livia said coldly. "You told me it saved the kingdom. Were you lying?" "No. But I didn't realize." Octavia stopped, gathering herself. "I didn't realize it would cost me everything. Maybe it shouldn't have been yours to begin with." The words hung in the air between them, brutal and final. Octavia stared at Livia as if seeing her for the first time. Seeing not the grateful Omega she had helped, but the threat she had invited into her home. "I was kind to you," Octavia whispered. "I welcomed you, protected you. How can you repay that with this?" Livia held her gaze steadily. "I'm protecting my children. That supersedes your kindness." Octavia left without another word. But Livia saw the tears streaming down her face, and felt a cold satisfaction that frightened her even as it thrilled her. The ceremony began at moonrise. The great hall was packed with hundreds of pack members and visiting dignitaries. The ritual circle glowed with ancient magic. Alpha Marcus stood at the center in his formal robes, looking every inch the powerful ruler he was. Luna Octavia stood to his right, also formally dressed, her face a careful mask of composure. Livia entered carrying Maximus, with 2 attendants carrying Titus and Lucius. All 3 boys wore the ceremonial robes that marked them as heirs to the throne. They were alert despite the late hour, their gold eyes bright with intelligence beyond their months. The high priestess began the ritual, speaking in the old tongue, calling upon the pack's founding magic, invoking the blood of Alpha's past, creating the mystical bonds that would tie these 3 children to the pack's power structure permanently. Marcus stepped forward first, offering his wrist to the ceremonial blade. 3 drops of blood for 3 sons. The blood fell into the sacred bowl, glowing with alpha power. Then it was Livia's turn. She placed Maximus in the attendant's arms and stepped forward. The blade bit into her wrist. Omega blood, thin and bright. 3 drops to match Marcus's. The blood mixed in the bowl, swirling together. Alpha and Omega. Father and mother. The foundation of the bloodline. Then came the moment Livia had been building toward. The high priestess turned to Luna Octavia. "As Luna of this pack, you must swear the oath of protection and loyalty to these heirs. You must acknowledge their place in the succession. You must vow to defend their claim against all who would challenge it." Octavia stepped forward slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it. She looked at the 3 babies, at Livia's triumphant face, at Marcus's carefully neutral expression. Then she spoke the words that pack law required. "I, Octavia Claudia, Luna of this pack, swear by my blood and my honor to recognize these 3 sons as heirs to the throne. I acknowledge their claim, To pledge my loyalty. I will defend their inheritance against all challenges, even unto death. The words echoed through the hall, magically binding. Octavia's own power recognized the oath, locked it into her very soul. She had just vowed to protect the children of her replacement, had formally acknowledged that her barrenness made her secondary to Livia's fertility. The humiliation was complete, public, irrevocable. The ceremony continued with more rituals, more oaths from council members and nobles. But everyone knew the significant moment had passed. They had all witnessed the Luna submit to the Omega's children. The pack hierarchy had shifted. After the ceremony, during the feast that followed, Livia held court like she had never been a kitchen servant. Nobles came to congratulate her. Council members sought her favor. Even representatives from other territories treated her with the deference normally reserved for Lunas. Octavia sat at the high table beside Marcus, her smile never wavering, accepting congratulations for the successful ceremony with grace and poise. But Livia caught her expression once, when she thought no one was watching. It was the look of someone who had just watched their entire world crumble. And Livia felt nothing but satisfaction. The final escalation. The 6th month after the triplets' birth was when Livia finally overstepped. Emboldened by the blood oath ceremony, by the growing support she had cultivated, by the intoxicating rush of power she no longer bothered to deny craving, Livia made her move. She called for Luna Octavia's demotion. Not publicly, not initially. She started with private conversations with the most influential council members. Reasoned arguments about efficiency, about modernizing the pack structure, about the awkwardness of having two high-ranking females with overlapping but undefined roles. The Luna title is largely ceremonial now, she pointed out. Octavia herself said the boys represent the kingdom's future. Shouldn't their mother have the official status to guide that future? Pack law recognizes bloodline above all else, she reminded them. I carry Marcus's bloodline now, 3 times over. Doesn't that mean something? The Northern Territories are already questioning why we maintain such traditional structures, she observed. Demonstrating that we value merit over empty tradition could strengthen our alliances. Council member Quintus, her earliest supporter, brought the proposal forward formally. Not to strip Octavia of all status, that would be too extreme. But to create 2 separate positions, Luna of ceremony, which Octavia could retain, and Luna of succession, which would go to Livia. The distinction was clear. One title was honorary, the other held actual power over the heirs and succession planning. The council chamber erupted. This is an insult to 12 years of loyal service, one elder protested. This is common sense, Quintus countered. The mother of the heirs should guide their upbringing. We're essentially telling the Luna her position means nothing. Her position means exactly what it always meant, ceremonial representation. But these boys need their mother to have authority over their development. Marcus listened to the arguments with growing frustration. He had explicitly commanded both women to stop this political warfare. Yet here it was again, escalating beyond even what he'd anticipated. When he finally spoke, his alpha command silenced every voice. No. The single word carried the weight of absolute authority. No restructuring. No new titles. No demotion of Luna Octavia. She has served this pack faithfully for 12 years and will continue to do so with full status and respect. Marcus's gold eyes found Livia in the gallery. The mother of my heirs already has protection and position. She needs no more. It was a clear rebuke. A drawing of a line that Livia had apparently crossed. But Livia, high on months of successful manipulation, drunk on her own sense of righteous maternal protection, made her crucial mistake. She stood up in the council gallery and spoke without permission. With respect, Alpha, you're wrong. The hall went silent. An Omega had just contradicted an Alpha in formal council. It was grounds for severe punishment, potentially even exile. Marcus's expression went dangerously still. Excuse me. I said you're wrong, Livia continued. Too far gone to stop now. These boys need their mother to have real power, not ceremonial kindness. They need me to be able to protect their interests without having to defer to someone whose only claim to status is a marriage that produced nothing. She heard the gasps, saw the shock on faces throughout the council. But she kept talking, the words pouring out like they had been building for months. Luna Octavia has been gracious, yes. Yes. But she is obsolete. Her role is decorative now. The real Luna, the one who matters, is the one who gave you heirs. Me. Octavia, sitting beside Marcus at the high table, had gone chalk white. Marcus stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You forget yourself, Omega. The use of her rank rather than her name was deliberate. A reminder of exactly where she stood in pack hierarchy. Triplets or no triplets. I forget nothing, Livia shot back beyond caring now. I remember everything. I remember being invisible while Luna Octavia wore crowns and attended parties. I remember nearly dying to birth your sons while she did nothing. I remember. Enough. The Alpha command hit like a physical force, dropping Livia to her knees involuntarily. Her wolf submitted even as her mind raged against it. You will be silent, Marcus continued, his voice cold as ice. You will leave this chamber. And you will remember that the only reason you are not being punished for this outburst is because those 3 children need their mother. He paused, letting that sink in. But motherhood does not grant you the right to destroy the Luna who welcomed you. It does not grant you authority to restructure pack hierarchy. And it certainly does not grant you the right to speak to me that way in my own council. Livia knelt on the marble floor, her body forced into submission by Alpha command, her mind spinning. She had gone too far. She knew it even through the fog of her ambition. Had pushed too hard, too fast, revealed too much of her intentions. But she also knew it was too late to take it back. Guards, Marcus said quietly. Escort Omega Livia to her quarters. She is confined there until I decide how to address this. 2 guards lifted her gently but firmly to her feet. Livia's legs barely supported her, the Alpha command having drained her strength. As they led her from the chamber, she caught one glimpse of Luna Octavia's face. The Luna was crying. Not from sadness, from relief, from vindication, from the satisfaction of watching her enemy finally reveal her true nature to everyone. The council's judgment. Livia spent 3 days confined to her quarters with her sons. 3 days of panic and anger and desperate planning. 3 days of the enormity of what she'd done finally sinking in. She had challenged an Alpha publicly. Had insulted the Luna in front of the entire council. Had demonstrated ambition that violated every Omega submission protocol. They could exile her for this. Could take her sons and banish her from the territory. Pack law allowed it when an Omega threatened pack stability. Her sons wouldn't remember her. Would grow up thinking their mother was whoever Marcus designated to raise them. Would never know Livia had existed. The thought made her physically ill. On the 4th day, Marcus summoned her to a private council. Not the full assembly but the inner circle. 7 elders who advised on the most serious matters. Luna Octavia was present, as was the high priestess who had performed the blood oath ceremony. Livia entered with her head held high despite her fear. She wouldn't grovel, wouldn't beg. If they were going to destroy her, she'd face it with dignity. You created a problem for me, Marcus said without preamble. Your outburst confirmed what many suspected, that you were never content with your assigned role. That you wanted more than to simply mother the heirs. That you saw Octavia's position as something to be conquered rather than respected. You only wanted power, Marcus interrupted. Let's be honest about that at least. You wanted the status that comes with birthing heirs. And initially that was understandable. But you let it consume you. Let it turn you into someone who would destroy a good woman to elevate yourself. He gestured to Octavia, who sat with her hands folded, her expression carefully neutral. Luna Octavia has asked me to be merciful with you. Despite everything you've done to undermine her, despite your public disrespect, she advocates for leniency. Do you know why? Livia shook her head. Because she understands that those 3 boys need their mother. That tearing them from you would damage them in ways we can't predict. She puts their needs above her own desire for revenge. Marcus leaned forward. Can you say the same? Have you put your children's needs above your ambition? The question hit like a slap. Livia wanted to say yes, wanted to claim everything she'd done was for the boys. But standing there, forced to examine her own behavior, she couldn't make the words come. Had she really been protecting her sons? Or had she been building her own empire? I thought I was, Livia whispered finally. I thought ensuring my status meant protecting them. But it didn't, Octavia spoke for the first time. It meant sacrificing pack stability for personal ambition. It meant teaching them that power matters more than honor. The high priestess cleared her throat. The blood oath ceremony binds you to those children permanently. It also binds them to you. Breaking that bond would harm them fundamentally. Pack law recognizes this. Which is why we can't simply exile you, Marcus said. Much as your behavior deserves it. Relief flooded through Livia, quickly followed by confusion. If they weren't exiling her, what were they doing? The answer came from Council Elder Gaius, the oldest member present. There is precedent for this situation. Ancient precedent rarely used. When a mother of heirs becomes a threat to pack stability but cannot be separated from her children, the council may invoke what is called the reversal. Livia's blood went cold. She had heard of reversals in her reading of old texts. They were brutal corrections, magical restructuring of pack hierarchy that could leave the target stripped of everything they'd built. No, she breathed. Yes, Marcus said firmly. The reversal will strip you of the social position you've accumulated beyond your role as mother. The servants who follow you will be reassigned. The council members you've influenced will be warned against your manipulations. Your quarters will be reduced to what's necessary for you and the children. You will lose the right to attend councils unless your children are being directly discussed. You're making me nothing again, Livia whispered. We're making you what you agreed to be, Octavia corrected. The mother of the heirs. Not a rival Luna. Not a political power. Simply a mother. But more than that, the high priestess added, we're invoking the second part of the reversal. The consequence. This was what Livia had feared most. Luna Octavia has served this pack for 12 years. Has shown grace under tremendous pressure. Has advocated for mercy when she had every right to demand punishment. The high priestess's ancient eyes fixed on Livia. As consequence for your actions, and to restore balance to pack hierarchy, Octavia will be granted the one thing you tried to take from her. What? Livia asked, though she dreaded the answer. Formal authority over the heirs' upbringing and education. You remain their mother biologically, but Octavia becomes their mother in all matters of governance, training, and royal preparation. The words hit like hammer blows. Livia would raise them, yes. Feed them, comfort them, maintain the maternal bond. But all decisions about their future, what they learned, who taught them, how they were prepared for leadership, would belong to Octavia. You can't, Livia gasped. They're my sons. And she tried to destroy me, Octavia said quietly. Yet I still fought for your right to remain with them. Perhaps think about that before claiming cruelty. The council voted unanimously. The reversal was enacted immediately. Within hours everything changed. The servants who had clustered around Livia were reassigned. Her expanded quarters were reduced to a modest 4-room suite, comfortable but not luxurious. Council members stopped seeking her opinion. The social invitations that had flooded her desk simply stopped. And worst of all, Luna Octavia was given offices right next to Livia's quarters, with staff and authority to make all decisions about the triplets' futures. Livia was still their mother, still loved them, still fed and cared for them. But she no longer controlled their destiny. The bitter exile. The reversal lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Livia watching Octavia select tutors for her sons. 3 weeks of seeing the Luna make decisions about their schedules, their education, their preparation for rule. 3 weeks of being reduced to the role she had once accepted but now found unbearable. The triplets, now 6 months old and developing faster than normal children, seemed confused by the change. They cried more for Livia, sensing her distress. Rejected some of Octavia's attempts to bond with them. Their powerful bloodlines made them unusually perceptive even in infancy. Livia held them when they fussed, whispered promises that she would fix this, that she would find a way. But she had no power left. No political allies. No social currency. The council had stripped it all away. She felt herself breaking. The ambition that had driven her for months was eating her alive now that it had nothing to work toward. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Just watched helplessly as another woman shaped her son's futures. On the 19th day, something inside Livia snapped. She woke at midnight with sudden crystal clarity. The reversal hadn't been about justice. It had been about cruelty. They had given her sons all the status she'd wanted, then stripped her of any ability to protect or guide them. Had turned her into a decorative mother while Octavia, barren, useless Octavia, got to play Luna to her own children.
Whoa.
Livia rose from her bed, moved to where the triplets slept in their enchanted cribs, looked at their perfect faces, their alpha features, their undeniable power even in sleep. These were her sons, her bloodline. Her sacrifice had brought them into the world. And if the council thought she would accept being sidelined in her own children's lives, they were catastrophically wrong. That night, Livia began planning her final move. The one that would either secure her son's future or destroy everything. She didn't care anymore which. She just couldn't live in this half-existence the council had condemned her to. She spent 2 more days gathering information, learning guard rotations, understanding which council members still held quiet sympathies for her, identifying weaknesses in the palace's magical protections. Then, on the 21st day, Livia made her move. She called for a formal challenge. Not of Alpha Marcus, that would be suicide, but of Luna Octavia. For custody of the heirs. For recognition as their true mother in all ways, not just biological. Pack law allowed it. Ancient, rarely invoked law that said if 2 females disputed custody of heirs, they could request formal judgment from the pack itself. A trial by declaration, where both would state their cases and the pack would vote on who should guide the children's futures. Marcus tried to refuse. This is madness. The council already ruled. The council doesn't supersede pack law, Livia said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. And pack law says I have the right to challenge custody decisions. I'm invoking that right. She was correct and everyone knew it. The law was ancient, designed to protect mother-child bonds even when politics interfered. It had rarely been used in modern times, but it was still valid. Marcus looked at Octavia, who had gone pale but stood straight. It's her right, the Luna said quietly. Let her have her trial. The trial was set for 3 days later. The entire pack would assemble. Both women would present their arguments for why they should guide the heirs. Pack would vote. Winner took custody. Loser was exiled. It was brutal, final, and exactly what Livia wanted. She couldn't live in the half-existence they'd created for her. Better to fight for everything or lose it all trying. The 3 days before the trial were tense beyond description. The palace was divided, those who admired Livia's fierce maternal devotion versus those who respected Octavia's grace and experience. Bets were placed. Alliances were tested. The pack was splitting down the middle. Livia spent the time with her sons, memorizing their faces, their laughs, their personalities. If she lost, she would be exiled that very day. Would never see them again. They would grow up thinking Octavia was their only mother. The thought made her want to vomit. But the alternative, winning, meant destroying Octavia completely. Meant exiling the woman who had shown her kindness, who had advocated for her even when Livia worked to destroy her. For the first time in months, Livia questioned herself. really questioned what she was doing, whether the cost was worth it, whether her ambition had truly twisted into something monstrous. But when she looked at her sons, all doubt fled. They were worth any cost, any sacrifice, even her own soul. The trial began at dawn. The trial. The pack assembled in the great outdoor arena, built centuries ago for exactly these kinds of formal judgments. Thousands of wolves filled the stone seats, their collective energy making the air itself feel charged. Representatives from allied territories watched from honored positions. The Northern High Council, Octavia's family, sat in grim silence. Alpha Marcus presided from the high seat, though he would not vote. This was pack judgment, not alpha decree. Luna Octavia was presented first, as was traditional for the challenged party. She wore her formal robes of state, every inch the Luna she had been for 12 years. But Livia noticed the shadows under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Octavia stepped into the judgment circle and spoke. "I will not defend myself by attacking the Omega Livia," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. "She is the biological mother of the heirs, and that bond is sacred. But motherhood is not merely about birth. It is about preparation, about training, about teaching these boys to rule wisely and justly." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I have served this pack for 12 years. I have been trained in governance since childhood. I understand diplomacy, strategy, the balance of power required to keep a kingdom stable. These are not skills taught through love alone. They require education, experience, wisdom." Octavia looked directly at Livia then. "You gave these boys life, and for that you have my eternal gratitude. But can you teach them to rule? Can you guide them through the political intricacies they will face? Can you prepare them for the burden of leadership?" It was a fair question, a devastating question. Livia had been a kitchen omega with no formal education. Everything she knew about power, she had learned through observation and manipulation over mere months. How could she compete with Octavia's lifetime of training? But Octavia wasn't finished. "I don't ask for custody out of spite or revenge. I ask because these boys deserve the best possible preparation for their futures. They deserve a mother figure who can teach them not just to love, but to lead." She bowed then formally and stepped back. The pack murmured among themselves. Octavia had made a strong case without ever attacking Livia personally. Had positioned herself as the reasonable choice, the educated option, the Luna who put the heir's needs above personal conflict. Then it was Livia's turn. She stepped into the judgment circle wearing simple robes, not the finery she might have chosen months ago, but the modest dress of a mother. She had learned something from Octavia's speech. This wasn't about appearing powerful. It was about appearing right. "Luna Octavia speaks truth," Livia began, and felt the surprise ripple through the crowd. "She is educated, experienced, trained in ways I will never be." She paused, let them absorb that admission. "But she is not their mother. Not in blood. Not in bone. Not in the way that matters most." Livia placed her hand over her heart. "I carried these boys through agony. Nearly died bringing them into this world. My body bore the scars of creating them. And in doing so, I bonded with them in ways that cannot be taught or learned. I know Maximus's cry means he's hungry while Titus's means he's frightened and Lucius's means he wants attention. I know this because I am their mother." She looked at the assembled pack. "The Luna says they need education. She's right. But they also need love. Fierce, protective, unwavering love that puts them before everything. Before politics, before tradition, before my own safety." Livia's voice grew stronger. "I am not educated like the Luna, but I am willing to learn. Willing to be taught. Willing to do whatever is necessary to give my sons what they need. Can the Luna say she loves them that way? That she would sacrifice everything for them?" It was a low blow, and Livia knew it. But she was fighting for her children. Honor came second. "These boys are mine," she finished. "Born of my body, carried in my heart, the reason I breathe. Take them from me and you destroy not just a mother but the very foundation of what family means. She stepped back, her heart pounding, knowing she had played her only card. Raw emotional appeal against Octavia's logical argument. The pack would now decide which mattered more. The voting began. Each adult pack member could cast one stone, white for Octavia, black for Livia. The decision required a clear majority, not just a plurality. Took 3 hours for everyone to vote. 3 hours of excruciating waiting while Livia stood in the judgment circle, watching pack members file past and drop their stones into the sacred vessels. She couldn't tell which way it was going. Some wolves met her eyes with sympathy, others with disapproval. Some seemed torn, taking long moments to decide before finally choosing their stone. Finally, the last vote was cast. The high priestess stepped forward to count. She would announce the result publicly, as was tradition. The arena fell silent. The priestess's hands moved through the vessels, sorting the stones into 2 piles. White and black. Octavia and Livia. Luna and Omega. Livia felt like she might pass out. This was it. Everything she had fought for, everything she had become, all came down to this moment. The priestess finished counting. Looked up with an expression Livia couldn't read. "The pack has spoken," she announced. "By a margin of 117 votes. Livia's heart stopped. Custody is granted to Omega Livia Marcella." The arena erupted. Livia's knees buckled. She had won. Her sons were hers. She could raise them, guide them, shape their futures. Everything she had fought for. Then she saw Octavia's face. The Luna stood perfectly still, her expression showing nothing. But tears were streaming down her face, and Livia suddenly saw what her victory meant. Octavia would be exiled, sent away from the pack she had served for 12 years, from the Alpha she loved, from the kingdom she had helped build. And it was Livia's fault. For just a moment, triumph curdled into something darker, something that felt like shame. But before Livia could process it, the high priestess spoke again. "According to pack law, the losing party must be exiled immediately. Luna Octavia Claudia, you have until sunset to leave our territory." Marcus stood from his high seat, his face showing the same carefully blank expression he wore when making impossible decisions. He descended to the arena floor, approached Octavia, took her hands. They spoke too quietly for anyone else to hear. Livia watched them, saw the love between them, saw Marcus's struggle to enforce a law he clearly wished he could break. Then Octavia pulled away, straightened her spine, and walked from the arena alone. No guards, no ceremony. Just a Luna who had lost everything, exiled for failing to birth heirs that an Omega had provided. The pack watched her go in uneasy silence. And Livia stood in the judgment circle, holding the victory she had fought so hard for, and for the first time wondered what exactly she had won. The hollow crown. The first week after the trial was chaos. Livia was formally elevated to Luna status, not by title but by function. She had custody of the heirs, which meant authority over their upbringing, education, and preparation for rule. Marcus tried to balance this with maintaining respect for tradition, but the reality was clear. Livia had won, and the pack structure had to adapt. Some wolves celebrated. The young alpha-born males especially saw Livia's victory as proof that the old order was changing, that merit mattered more than birthright. They gathered around her, offering support and allegiance. Others were horrified. The traditionalists saw the exile of a loyal Luna as a betrayal of everything the pack stood for. They whispered that Livia had poisoned the pack's values, that her Omega ambition had corrupted pack law itself. The pack was fracturing, and Livia was at the center of it. But she had her sons. That was what mattered. She could deal with political fallout as long as she had Maximus, Titus, and Lucius in her arms. Except they wouldn't stop crying. The triplets, now 6 months old and frighteningly perceptive, seemed to sense the wrongness of what had happened. They fussed constantly, rejected their feedings, woke screaming from nightmares. Even Livia's presence couldn't fully calm them. The healers said it was the disruption to their routine, The sudden absence of Octavia, who had become a consistent presence in their short lives. They needed stability, and Livia's victory had destroyed whatever stability they had known. On the 8th day, Maximus, the largest and strongest of the triplets, developed a fever that no healer could break. His little body burned, his powerful bloodline fighting something the physicians couldn't identify. Livia held him through the night, terrified, while healers applied every spell and potion they knew. Nothing worked. The fever climbed higher. "It's not physical," the high priestess finally said at dawn. "It's magical. The child is rejecting something." "Rejecting what?" Livia demanded. The priestess looked at her with ancient, knowing eyes. "Injustice." The word hung in the air. The blood oath you performed bound these children to the pack's core values: honor, justice, loyalty, protection of the pack above personal ambition. The priestess touched Maximus's burning forehead gently. "This child can feel that something wrong happened, that someone loyal was punished for someone ambitious. And his bloodline is rejecting it." "That's impossible," Livia whispered. "He's 6 months old. He's an alpha bloodline. They know. They always know." Marcus was summoned. He listened to the priestess's explanation, then looked at Livia with an expression she couldn't fully read. "What do we do?" he asked. "You restore balance," the priestess said simply. "Or you lose the child." The words were brutal, final. Maximus was dying because of Livia's victory, because she had exiled a just Luna to serve her own maternal ambition. "We bring Octavia back," Marcus said immediately. "No." Livia clutched Maximus tighter. "The pack voted. Pack law." "Pack law is killing my son," Marcus snapped. "I don't care what the vote said. I'm the alpha, and I'm invoking emergency authority. Octavia returns or Maximus dies. Choose." It wasn't really a choice. Livia looked down at her son's fevered face, felt his little body burning in her arms, and knew she couldn't let him die for her ambition. But bringing Octavia back meant... what? Losing everything again. "She comes back as Luna," Marcus continued. "Full status restored. You retain custody of the children, but she regains her position. Both of you will raise them together, or neither of you will." "She'll hate me," Livia whispered. "Probably. But these boys need you both. You're their mother. She's their conscience." Livia wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to claim that she could be everything the boys needed. But Maximus whimpered in her arms, and she felt his fever spike higher. "Bring her back," Livia said, the words tasting like ashes. Octavia was found 3 territories away, staying with her family in the northern holdings. The messenger brought Marcus's summons. The heirs needed her. "Pack emergency. Return immediately." She came. When Octavia entered the healing chambers where Maximus lay dying, Livia expected rage. Expected the Luna to refuse to help, to let Livia face the consequences of her actions. Instead, Octavia went straight to the triplets. Touched Maximus's forehead with healing magic that Livia hadn't known she possessed. Whispered words in the old tongue that seemed to seep into the child's bones. The fever broke within minutes. Maximus's eyes fluttered open, focused on Octavia, and he smiled. A real, genuine smile of recognition and trust. Livia felt like she'd been stabbed. Octavia stayed with the children through the night, healing not just Maximus but Titus and Lucius as well, whose own stress-induced illnesses had gone unnoticed. She sang to them in ancient dialects, used magic Livia had never learned, soothed them with the skill of someone who had been trained for motherhood even if biology had denied her own children. And Livia watched, helpless, as her sons responded to Octavia in ways they never fully had to her alone. When dawn came, Marcus assembled both women in his study. No counsel, no witnesses, just the 3 of them and the impossible situation. "You will both raise them," he said firmly. "Livia, you're their mother by birth and blood. Octavia, you're their mother by training and magic. They need both of you, and you will learn to coexist." "How?" Livia asked bitterly. She'll undermine me every. I will do no such thing, Octavia interrupted quietly. I came back for them, not for revenge. But you. She looked at Livia with eyes that held profound sadness. You destroyed me for your ambition. Nearly let your son die rather than admit you needed help. And you're still thinking about political power instead of what's best for these children. The words were true enough to hurt. I don't know how to be what they need, Livia admitted finally, the confession tearing out of her. I thought if I just had control, if I just had authority, I could figure it out. But I can't do this alone. It was the first genuine humility she had shown in months. The first crack in the armor of ambition that had consumed her since the triplets' birth. Octavia studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, extended her hand. Then don't do it alone. Me teach you. Not as rivals, but as mothers. Both of us. For them. Livia looked at the offered hand, at the Luna she had tried to destroy, at the grace being extended despite everything. She thought about her sons, about Maximus's fever, about how her victory had nearly killed the child she'd fought so hard to protect. And she took Octavia's hand. I'm sorry, Livia whispered. For everything. I know, Octavia replied. Now we teach those boys not to make our mistakes. Epilogue. The real cost. 6 months later, an uneasy peace had settled over the palace. Livia and Octavia co-parented the triplets in an arrangement that surprised everyone, including themselves. Livia provided the fierce maternal love, the biological bond, the raw devotion. Octavia provided the education, the magical training, the preparation for leadership. The boys thrived under this dual motherhood, growing strong and healthy. At 1 year old, they were already showing distinct personalities. Maximus was the natural leader, protective of his brothers. Titus was the clever one, always watching and learning. Lucius was the diplomat, already charming everyone he met. They would be magnificent alphas someday. But the pack remained divided. Half supported the new structure, seeing it as evolutionary progress. Half resented it, seeing it as the destruction of tradition. The fracture lines ran deep, and no amount of forced cooperation between the two mothers could fully heal them. Livia had what she wanted, her son's status, recognition. But the cost was visible in her eyes every time she looked at Octavia. The guilt that came from destroying someone who had shown her kindness. The knowledge that her ambition had nearly killed her own child. She was no longer the kitchen omega who had carefully planned to survive. She had become something else, someone who had tasted power and found it both intoxicating and poisonous. Late one night, while the triplets slept, Livia found Octavia in the nursery. The Luna was watching the boys with an expression of such profound love and sadness that Livia couldn't help but speak. Do you regret coming back? Octavia didn't turn. Every day. Then why stay? Because they need me. And because someone has to teach them that power without conscience destroys everything it touches. Now she looked at Livia. You gave them life. I'll give them wisdom. Together, maybe we'll raise men instead of tyrants. And us. Can we ever truly be friends? Well, allies. Perhaps. Mothers. Already are. Octavia smiled sadly. That's the price of what you did, Livia. You get your sons, but you lose the possibility of peace. It was true. And Livia knew it would be true for the rest of her life. She had been just a kitchen omega. Then she had given birth to the Alpha's triplet heirs. Then she had destroyed the Luna. But in the end, the only thing that truly mattered was those 3 sleeping boys, heirs to a kingdom fractured by their birth, raised by 2 mothers who had learned too late that some victories cost more than defeat ever could. And somewhere in the darkness, the pack waited to see which lessons the boys would learn. Their birth mother's ambition or their second mother's grace. The future of 5 territories rested on that answer. The triplets slept on, innocent of the weight